We're back with the 32-team NFL franchise of the 2007-2008 NFL season. Here we are with the 11-5 Baltimore Ravens recap. They were the number one team in the AFC North, which is incredibly different than their real-life season. So the 2007 Ravens had Steve McNair as their starting quarterback, but he ended up getting injured. And then Kyle Bowler took over, and they were, I think, the 8th or 9th overall pick in the draft. But in my reality, Steve McNair was healthy almost the entire season, allowing them to have a very solid season. Because McNair in 2006, 2007 led the Ravens to, I believe it was the AFC Championship. But here it is, he was able to throw for over 3,000 yards, 24 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, did run for 275 rushing yards, and was allowing his veteran presence to truly lead the Ravens successfully this year. Here it is, making some bigger plays now. Just chucking the ball down the field, being a true effective quarterback in this league. We see Mark Clayton, one of the top receivers for Baltimore, with 738 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. There is another huge deep throw against the Saints there. I was very pleased with McNair. Even though he was like an 83 overall, which is good, is not elite, but is so good, he almost played like an elite quarterback. And there's Derek Mason, the veteran, with 621 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. He did retire at the end of the season. And so then Demetrius Williams and Darling ended up taking over a little bit. And due to a lot of the injuries that happened late in the season, I had the Ravens sign Antonio Bryant. As you can see, he only had 157 yards and 3 touchdowns, but they signed him week 15, week 16, and he did help during the playoffs a little bit because, again, when I lost some of my receivers, I figured Baltimore would have made a move, especially like Antonio Bryant, to help them out. Todd Heap had 613 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns, and although he's a solid tight end, I expected more stats from him. I thought he's more of a 1,000-yard receiving tight end, but I guess I just wasn't using him as often as I thought I did. But despite that, I still believe he's a solid player, and I look forward to this upcoming season with Todd Heap, seeing how he works with Steve McNair. And here we go, Willis McGahee, who was a top 5 running back throughout the entire season. Look at him breaking tackles into the end zone, tiptoeing along the sideline with 5 yards shy of 1,300 rushing yards, 18 rushing touchdowns, and about 131 receiving yards. And so McGahee, who again is a running back who tends to get injured, was dynamic. And yes, I still had them draft Ray Rice in the offseason in the second round because he was still there. Their first round pick, I went with Aqib Talib, the cornerback, because again, they did not need Joe Flacco. There was no indication that they would have went with a quarterback in their first round when they just went 11-5 with Steve McNair. They would want to brush up on other aspects of their team, which was their defense, to get a solid cornerback because McAllister is getting older and they wanted to get someone who's a solid defensive player. So they passed on Joe Flacco for the cornerback. Ray Rice was available in the second round and they ended up picking him up. So it's going to be Ray Rice and Willis McGahee this next season. So looking forward to that duo pair running backs in Baltimore. And now here we are with some defense because again, although they didn't rank high in the defense, they still were powerful. There's Ray Lewis forcing the fumble. And here we go again. Another forced fumble picked up, ran right into the end zone. And here's the Ravens now having a kick return. And this is going to go all the way against the Cleveland Browns, the second place in the AFC North. Now as we get to the rankings, they were a top 10 offensive team. As you can see there, with total offensive yards. They were lower ranked with total passing at 24, but that was largely due to their powerhouse running game where they were 5th ranked in total rushing yards. When we look at their total points per game, they were 6th. They knew how to put points on the board. As for their defense, they were 10th. So yeah, they were a top 10 defense, but I thought they'd be higher. When we look at their passing yards allowed, they were 13th. And they were 13th again in least rushing yards. So kind of mediocre on the defense. And then they were, again, 13th in least points allowed. So they kind of stayed 13 for all those other stats. But again, they made the playoffs. They beat the they beat the Denver Broncos in the playoffs. And then they lost the Oakland Raiders in the divisional round. So looking forward to seeing them bounce back next year.